by the resurgent skinhead scene that flourished in the early days of Thatcher's Britain.
We all had our own fashion, we all basically liked the same sort of music, we all went to the same, we all had the same interests, so yeah, I mean, it was good. It was a very, happy time. Good times, yeah. You got punch up there and there, it's all part of growing up.
Here we are in Holts in Camden Town, where we've been buying boots for a long time. This is the Temple of DMs. We worship at the Temple of DMs. It's got soul.
And the hobnail boot.
We'd just been through, 6, 7 years of punk. Reggae had come along as well, and white kids, particularly in this country, and white punk kids had started listening to reggae, and so reggae bands began to get an acceptance, which up until then they hadn't got. And so black music started filtering into the culture anyway.
There was a band called The Specials from Coventry, and I'd read about them in The Melody Maker, and it was remarkable that they weren't exactly the same as us, but they were wearing suits and hats and stuff at a time when
suits and hats weren't in.
Exactly. And a whole ball started rolling that we had never really envisaged.
This new scene found its voice in Two Tone, a record label led by Coventry-based band The Specials. Two Tone was more than a record label. It was a political manifesto promoting a multiracial Britain.
They kind of fitted in, I think, with the Specials and the Selecter, because all three of those bands, although they're all kind of lumped together because of the two-tone tour, all have very, very specific identities. Although everyone says, oh, it was all ska music, it was, and that was like the basis of it. But it was... Madness, I think, had a much more light-hearted approach to it, and the subjects that they dealt with were very much more orientated towards London and being young, having fun, girlfriend problems, all those kind of things.
Every band on Two Tone does this song.
His greatest hero was the originator of ska music, Kingston's Prince Buster. So much so that they took their theme tune and name from one of his best-known songs.
Madness, they call it madness.
Madness, madness, they call it madness. Madness, madness, they call it madness. It's plain to see, they want a piece of me. Madness, madness, they call it gladness.
Madness, I'm calling it madness.
Madness is a good band, man. I mean, nobody tell me that. I don't usually say what the next man say. I have my own mind, my own choice, my own taste, my own flavor. And I consider them excellent band. And they did an excellent job of my music, my interpretation of my songs.
The stuff that stood out on radio to me was mainly Motown and reggae. And Prince Buster pretty much stuck out. And he started taking pieces from various Prince Buster songs, lines, putting them together, and thus, came up with the Prince.
Buster, he sold the heat with a rock steady beat. But not in Orange Street. A ghost dance is preparing. You got to help us with your feet. If you're not in the mood to dance.
The Prince was their first and only two-tone single, reaching number 16 in the charts in 1979. But Madness's place in two-tone was beginning to be undermined by a racist skinhead following. As the only white band on the label, Madness became an easy target for the National Front, who co-opted their gigs for recruitment purposes.
Everyone's gigs, when we first started, there were lots of fights. It just wasn't confined to two-tone or us particularly. And because the punk thing was occasionally violent.
You know, the way we dressed and everything was reminiscent of the skinheads, you know, before our time, when they first skinhead fashion arrived, and then ska music, and then they think, yeah, you know, this is something they could relate to.
And so you had, you know, it was like stepping on an ice cream, you know, it squirted out in different directions, and a big part of that was this kind of fascist thing that started at football grounds, and certain gangs would actually specifically meet at different venues, you know, and have punch-ups that were completely nothing to do with the band. And I don't know, the fascist thing was just like a fashion. I don't know where it came from. I think there was a lot of confusion in kids at that time. Yeah, I think people did want something to belong to, and it was a very difficult time, I think.
We did get in trouble at once because we were supposed to talk up against, you know, fascism, racism, kind of the skinhead movement, but in our opinion, we couldn't stop anyone going to our gigs just because of the fashion. You couldn't tell
when
the
you're
difference
young,
anyway.
you don't know what you don't know when you don't know it. You're young, you know, and we said really naive things in interviews. We're in a band, we're not politicians. We come on and we play music. We don't sit on chairs and go, okay, let's debate. You know, we felt unqualified to be. Yeah, we were young, you know.
But you were very much associated with that skinhead following.
Well, our fashion was kind of like that, and we didn't have any black people in the band, so it's difficult for us to say, you know, one way or the other. I mean, it was difficult for us to prove that we weren't into that kind of thing. But, yeah, there were a lot of people, you know, I think because we had no black people in the band, it was obvious.
Hey, you! Don't watch that! Watch this! This is the heavy, heavy monster sound! The nuttiest sound around! So if you're coming up the street and you're beginning to feel the heat, well, listen, Buster, you better start to move your feet to the rockinest, rock-steady beat of madness. One step beyond.
Madness left Two Tone after one single, but they were quickly taken up by another independent label, the Maverick Stiff Records.
A few people recommended and said just one band that you'd really like, which is Madness. And I couldn't see them. So I was getting married, and I just got the idea that maybe to see them, they might play at the wedding, really. It's just a kind of a rough idea, and to my surprise, they agreed. And that's the first time I actually saw them play. I mean, I think they came to take the piss, really. You know, they thought record company executive, you know, we'll show them kind of thing. One Step Beyond, I saw that as the first single, and a great title for an album. So when I went down to hear the album when it was finished, which was, you know, they did it very, very quickly, they hadn't recorded it, the track. And they all were aware that, you know, they hadn't, and that I would be, you know, they were like that throughout the entire relationship I had to them. They're always trying to pull one over on you, really. You had to kind of get up a little earlier in the morning and think about it, really.
One Step Beyond we didn't like at all. We just thought it was a throwaway, and it was we only did a couple of bars of it. We thought, there you go. But we didn't know about editing. Of course, he just took the couple of bars and repeated it. Blasted. Didn't get away with that one.
I picked something they couldn't see at all, which was successful. They kind of gave me, I became the single picker, so that became my kind of job, really.
My girl's mad at me. I didn't want to see the film tonight.
Their third single, My Girl, reached number 3 in the charts. Under Dave Robinson's guidance, they moved away from the ska influences of their previous singles and started to develop their own distinctive sound, focused around Mike Barson's unique piano playing.
All bands have a kind of a hierarchy that you have to kind of get used to. There's usually one person in the band who kind of controls the group. There's usually a musical person. In this case, it was Mike Barson. And he was also the melody of the song, so he was in a kind of a unusual role. A very suspicious individual, never entirely. Always thought you had some kind of ulterior motive. You know, so you had to kind of say, look, you know, this is it. I think it would be good for the band. I think also, you know, we'd have a hit.
I mean, the focus was always around Mike's piano, and everyone would stand round it with songs and ideas. And, you know, I'm always amazed, really, how disciplined we were. Someone's actually said, and I'm sure you'll hear it quoted often that someone said that we rehearsed like the German football team, that it was like very kind of worked out and very meticulous.
Lee used to always be writing lyrics, yeah. So, I mean, often I used to get, you know, Lee would give me a bunch of lyrics on a bit of paper, and then usually I would write a tune to it, yeah. If a little bit of dodgy about a little bit, because often it was very incomprehensible the way he wrote.
Half-caste child, and it was just mainly from relatives and you know, close friends. Just a sort of negative reaction, you know. It wasn't on, but now that child is what, 20, 21 years of age, and she's an absolute diamond.
This is a serious matter. Too late to reconsider. No one's gonna wanna know ya. Our mum, she don't wanna know.
There was at a time when we were being castigated for being racist and all that, but you know, that was the way that Lee writes his songs. You know, it's not always completely clear.
I'm feeling twice as older.
I think there's certainly a lot more depth to the band than you know, it sometimes might appear on the surface. But even if you look at some of the early songs, I mean, you know, Embarrassment, which on the surface is just a kind of great jaunty pop single, is actually, you know, a song that makes some very kind of personal points about certain aspects of life as they saw it around them.
The headmaster's had enough today. All the kids have gone away, gone to fight the next door school. Every term that is the rule. Sits alone and vents his cane. Same old backsides again. All the ones tell two tales. Walking home and squashing snow.
I was sleeping on the floor in Lee's flat in the Caledonian Road, and I was trying to write a song, and I was very specifically trying to write a song in the style of Ian Dury, and especially the songs he was writing then, which often sort of catalogues of phrases in a constant stream, you know. And I was writing about my time at school. Pink Floyd had a big hit with Teacher, Leave Those Kids Alone. It didn't really relate to me because I hadn't been to a public school where I was bossed about and told to sing, you know, and all that. I went to a school where there was absolutely all going on. And the teachers were in the same boat, you know, they dreaded having to go back as much as we did. But I mean, someone said to me, it's an element of folk music in Madness, in that you write about what's around you, and sometimes we write about the injustice of the things around us. In a preaching kind of way.
Father wears his Sunday best. Mother's tired, she needs a rest. The kids are playing up downstairs. Sister's sighing in her sleep. Brother's got his name to keep, he can't hang around our house.
But it's difficult to talk about a whole concept of what Madness songs are about because there are 7 different writers writing slightly differently. And the only thing we concur on is maybe the main influences, which are Ray Davies and Ian Dury.
I don't think it's an influence thing. I think it's both got a shared aim, really, rather than... I always felt that, you know. I don't really like the idea of influencing people. I'd sooner we was all in it together, you know.
Well, it was the look of them mainly. You know, there were photographs of them around standing in a line, which you may have noticed us approximately.
That was a good idea.
And I also remember Mike did some graffiti at, was it Highbury Overground Station? On the back of Ian's first album, there was a guy called Paul Hangs Loose.
Yeah, Paul.
And he was doing a pretty extraordinary kind of body shape.
Like this.
Is it something else we borrowed? Something else we borrowed?
I didn't know.
Yeah, we've got a lot of things, yeah. I mean, the first singles as well. I mean, when we were mad about the music, it wasn't just... I mean, it definitely wasn't just the image and the look, but it was...
I mean, I call it entertainment tradition rather than musical. You're there for a reason, you know. You're not there to tell people your dreams. You're not there to tell... I'm not, anyway. I don't think Madness. I think we're out there to entertain people. Make them laugh, make them dance, make them go home happy.
essentially selfish because we're really enjoying ourselves. But our main thing is to entertain people, you know.
It's just gone noon, our past monsoon on the banks of the River Nile. Here comes the boat, only half afloat. Osman grins a toothless smile.
They pioneered the pop video as a promotional tool and as an art form in itself. I think they were a hugely important band in the development of pop videos. They were very much them, but they were like very inventive, very humour. I think a lot of the Madness humour is illustrated via their videos.
Hello. I'm here to warn you that in the video you're about to see, there is an extremely dangerous stunt which I'd like none of you at home to try and copy.
Cause I wasn't there. Don't blame me, it just isn't fair. You listen to their side, now listen to mine. Come think of a story, sure you'll find me sometime.
We always used to sit in a room together before the video was made, and we always come up with our crazy ideas. I mean, most of them were like jokes. Anyone who could think of them funny, it was like kind of millions of little Betty Hill sketches. And Dave Robinson had a team of people that could make them real. As in, you know, you couldn't be Superman charging through one window, coming out the other, flying through the air.
So you just
demolishing
lie
a
on the
building.
top of a double-decker bus pretending to be Superman.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm a big boy now, or so they say, so if you'll serve, I'll be on my way.
A very broad spectrum of people liked them for all kinds of different reasons. You had young kids who loved the dances, and you had older people who kind of, you know, liked some of the kind of music hall elements of, you know, there's always a kind of a music hall organ or a kind of, their music was very broad. It kind of, you know, it eventually encapsulated quite a lot of English music, you know. It was kind of a very broad, very interesting period. You know, I had a really good time with it. And obviously we sold an awful lot of records, which is always good, you know.
In 3 years, Madness had recorded 16 hit singles and 5 albums, and had their only #1 hit, House of Fun, in 1982. They were still in their early 20s and were already one of the biggest bands in Britain.
Stiff were releasing single after single. There was no gap. So as we finished one single, then another one would be out. So we'd make the video again and go round and round and round. There's always this thing, a lot of musicians say, oh, it's, you know, everyone thinks it's so glamorous. But it was, I mean, when you're on a label like Stiff, it was kind of bring your own sandwiches, you know, on tour with you. And, you know, even though we were looked after, it was, you know, it was pretty kind of, you had to be pretty hardy, really.
They weren't keen on touring, didn't like leaving Camden Town for any length of time at all. Didn't like foreign foods, you know. Even when they toured in England, they didn't like to be away for more than 10 days. You know, they had to be back and kind of refill their Camden requirement, whatever it was.
It was that old rock and roll attitude of keep them on the road, you know, while it's going well, keep them working. And then we just had this feeling, God, it's 3 years up the road and we're not seeing our friends, we're not seeing our family, who are we working for? You know, we started out to do this for ourselves, you know, to enjoy.
Being in the band, you know, it was like a 24-hour thing, you know. And, you know, I was writing songs. We were touring a lot as well. And also the record company, and like, they really just push you, you know. They want to sort of milk everything out of it that they can.
No, I didn't push them at all. I suppose, you know, to a degree, there is a certain time for you, and you grow through that time. Particularly you could then. I mean, less nowadays, where there's much more media attention on a band, much quicker. It wasn't like, you know, you could drag Madness screaming anywhere. They wouldn't go.
We were in Halligan's Heap rehearsal rooms, and I said, guys, I'm leaving the band. And there was a sort of shocked silence. And and that was it, really. Yeah, you know, we didn't really, you know, go into too much talk in those days about things. No.
being one of the people who joined the band a bit later on, Mike had always seemed like the core of the band, and when he announced that he was going to leave, I was very surprised indeed. I didn't feel bad about it. Sometimes in situations where things are going wrong, you almost want them to happen just for something to change, you know.
I think what happened was when Mike left, the spark went in a certain way. I think we were still writing great songs, but the spark had left because, you know, we were 7 that started out, you know, with so much history. And when he left, it just sort of, it wasn't the same.
Yes, but he was definitely distancing himself, and we all wanted for his happiness, so at the end of the day...
You know, there's a very strange schizophrenia in this band, there always has been. You know, on the one hand, you have all this sense of what we're doing is successful, you've got to be successful, you know, in a kind of like, otherwise you'd be back on the bins sort of way. And on the other side is the fact that we all are friends, or to a greater or lesser extent, people who've known each other for a very long time. So that if people make decisions that are from their emotions and from their lives, that you can't judge them from the business side of it.
Exactly, well said.
Thank you.
I mean, nobody was happy with the arrangement, except Mike, probably. But he got married to a Dutch girl as well, and he wanted to do other things. And I think he felt that he had enough income and whatever it was time to do it. And he was a very strong and opinionated person. I did try and talk him out of it, but it was an impossibility.
Trying hard, I thought I'd done my best. All my life, I can't get no rest.
So I got a bit into Tibetan Buddhism, yeah, which gave me a bit more answers about, you know, what it's all about, sort of thing, you know.
I hear them say tomorrow's just another day.
You know, I mean, we had success and everything, but all those things that it brings you, there's some things that it doesn't, which is like, you know, I wasn't so happy about the way it was going, and it's like, you know, I mean, it's great when you've got all that, you know, creative stuff going and you're coming up with ideas and it's enjoyable, but I don't know, you know, you can keep doing it, and what then, you know, what then when you go home in the evening and, you know, you lay down on your pillow to go to sleep, sort of thing, you know.
Yesterday's man hang on to today, to sing in the old-fashioned way. It must get better in the long run, has to get better in the long run.
Soon after Mike's departure, the band parted company acrimoniously with Dave Robinson, and a failed attempt to run their own record label, Zarjazz, took its toll financially. Madness was still producing hit singles, but they were losing the creative energy that had held them together.
I first came across them when they signed to Virgin Records in 1984, which was, I guess, right at that sort of transitionary stage of their career. They were just getting over the departure of Mike, and they were still a very successful group, but there was a certain degree of self-reanalysis and reappraisal of what sort of a group they wanted to be.
Yesterday's man hang on to today, to sing any old way. It must get better in the long run.
In the mid-80s, Madness struggled to recapture their old form. Some of the band wanted to bring in synthesizers to spice up their sound. The gang was over.
Mark and I weren't stupid, and we realised that, you know, from what they were saying, it's like, well, we want to split up the band, but we might be doing other projects maybe together. So really, it was, you know, like, okay, well, why don't you just say that you don't want to work with us? You know, why don't you just be a bit more honest? And we were just concerned that the name Madness shouldn't be used for any, you know, future modern projects. Just for quality control, really.
So how did you feel when they re-emerged?
As The Madness, I thought it was a cop-out, to be honest. Yeah, a complete cop-out.
Were you hurt?
I was hurt, yeah.
Mike and Woody, should I say left or... It was just a bit of it was a right sour time, you know, but we're all hanging on for that, whatever it was we was hanging on to. I mean, I knew that there was quite an odd atmosphere, which, you know, we all knew that, you know, it was the fucking end, that sort of thing.
Basically, they were growing up. They were trying to stop being nutty boys and get out of the whole kind of baggy trouser thing and be taken a little bit more seriously. But it wasn't what the public wanted from them. That was the dilemma. The public still wanted them to be nutty boys. And it was, whilst also being, I think, a very strong period for them creatively, it was not the most successful. In fact, the opposite. It was they started to go on a commercial kind of downturn.
You know, that moment when Mike left was the moment when the band finished, really, and that should have been that. And we just stumbled on blindly down different alleys, looking for a reason to stay together. And, you know, I mean, how old was I then? 1986. I was 25. So I was 25, so I was still a pretty young person. And I'd done everything that one is supposed to do in one's lifetime, and I didn't know what to do next, you know. So it came as a great relief, as I think a lot of the band have said, when it finally finished, that you do have to go out there in the world on your own and find out for yourself, outside the castle walls, you know, what goes on in the real world, you know, having not been in the real world for 8 years.
The wife said, look, you're laying in bed, you're disappearing up your own arse, pulling the covers over, you know, that sort of depression period. God, I won't go into detail there. Time for me pill. I've done a little small stint for the environmental health as a dustman. Oh, I tell you about it. No, have we got time? That was very interesting, 6 weeks of that. I mean, you know, lovely Simons, yeah. Loved it. It was great to get up nice and early in the morning and break into a sweat before 7 o'clock, running around doing figures of 8 with each other, putting these dustbins on, watching it go in and watching all the maggots flowing.
On the 8th of August 1992, the police opened the British Authority, and they said that people had been phoning in saying there had been an earthquake in London. They had described some effects like heavy lorries passing outside. People were frightened. Tower blocks were being evacuated because people thought that the tower block was going to fall down. It was an intensity of about 5. When I told the police that I thought the cause of the disturbance was a Madness concert at Finsbury Park, they didn't believe me at first. And I got a phone call the next night from the police who said exactly the same felt effects had occurred. And so they did believe me after all. So my reputation as a seismologist still remains intact.
Hey, you! Don't watch that! Watch this! This is the Heavy, Heavy Monster sound! The nuttiest sound around! So if you're coming off the street and you're beginning to feel the heat, well, listen, Buster, you better start to move your feet to the rockinest, rock-steady beat of madness. One step
I mean, we'd been away for such a long time, and the warmth and enthusiasm from all these people was so overwhelming. I mean, it was like, I was absolutely in floods of tears when I hit the stage, and we went into the first song, and it was like, bloody hell, the whole park just went.
Madstock 1992 was such a financial success that the band repeated it twice more in 1994 and 1998.
You know, we were selling places out, great. But then it was, you know, you're sort of on a treadmill, the old status quo syndrome, maybe. I just felt that we should be a bit more courageous and write something new. And it was all very smooth, you know. I went on and said, Mike, you know, put the tulips down, I'm coming over.
Last year, the band released a new album, Wonderful. Although the singles were vintage madness, they failed to set the charts alight.
Can you remember his name?
The Gang of Seven, who've been bound together as Madness for 23 years, are currently unsure of their future.
Will you remember?
It's all over, Mike. No, Mike, no, back there.
What does being in madness mean?
Oh, no, not that question.
Tony the horse, he passed this way. He died for entertainment.